Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be testing 5 rackets. For you that don't know, I'm switching rackets. You can check out my white racket reveal video and find out the reasons why. And when it comes to switching rackets, for me personally, this is an agonizing process because when I'm playing poorly while testing rackets, I of course attribute the poor play directly to the racket that I'm testing, so it becomes an absolute nightmare. However, in this video series where I'm testing rackets, that's hopefully going to be short. I don't want to drag this on forever. I want to find something quickly. I am going to give you specific instructions on how to find the perfect racket for you, because yes, we are going to attribute the poor play to the racket that we're testing. But have you ever had the sensation of missing a shot terribly, but the shot still feeling quite good when you missed it? On the other hand, you could hit a winner, an amazing shot, and it could still feel terrible. So when it comes to testing rackets, it's all about feel, because the tricky thing about tennis is that we build up so much muscle memory. We get used to the shape of the grip. We get used to the shape of the racket, never mind the specifics of it. So once we test new rackets, everything is going to be different, and a lot of players are thrown off by that, and it takes them quite some time to find a new racket. Many players play with the same racket for many years, and other players, the ones that I'm jealous of, can play with whatever. They couldn't care less what racket it is. They don't think twice about it. Now, the number one recommendation for which racket I should test in my white racket reveal video was the Yonex Ezone 100, and I love the company Yonex. I think the rackets are cool. In my opinion, the company has great quality control. The rackets are well made, and I always wanted to play with Yonex. But I've tested many Yonex rackets over the years, and for whatever the reason is, I simply cannot play with them. This Yonex Ezone 100 racket is phenomenal. It has the perfect combination of power and control. It's a little bit on the stiffer side with a rating of 67. Hey, holy. To je katastrofa, Felt terrible that backhand. Off center, I got nothing out of that. Zero. Here's the thing on the Yonex.
Yeah.
I felt like I served okay.
Yeah, better serve.
Serve wasn't too bad. The forehand was okay.
Yeah.
But my backhand was a disaster.
Yeah. I made a prediction. I thought you wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I don't like it at all. I'm gonna have to count this one out.
Yeah, I knew you would.
There's no way I can play with this just because I have no backhand. The Yonex rackets have always been considered to be great rackets for two-handed backhands. But I can tell you that for whatever the reason is, I honestly don't know. I could not hit my two-handed backhand with the Yonex racket. And I gave this racket a good chance. I didn't dismiss it right off the bat. I played a lot of points with it, and I'm gonna have to count it out without further testing. I just simply cannot play with Yonex for inexplicable reasons, because based on the specs, this should be a racket that's good for me. The only thing that makes sense to me is that I simply don't like this unique head shape of the racket. The next racket I tested was the Bolt. And a lot of you guys are probably not familiar with this company, but they make high quality rackets, and the two that I got were a little bit on the stiffer side. I tend to like rackets that are a little bit stiffer. We're going to get into that later. So I received the Bolt 100 LV2 and the Bolt B100 V2, and the lighter one I didn't like at all. I could not control the ball. Oh my goodness. Bolt. Milan is laughing. Listen, I usually play with longer rackets. All the rackets that I have today are regular length, so you could excuse this double fault that I hit on top of my frame due to the fact that the rackets that I'm testing are a little bit shorter. Come on. I thought that I could probably manage an unstrung weight of 285 or 290, but there's simply not enough stability at the moment of contact. And for that reason, I couldn't take the lighter Bolt racket into consideration. I abandoned playing with it just after a few points. However, the heavier version of this racket, the B100 V2, that's 312 grams strung, felt a lot better. And I thought that I played pretty well with it. This version of the Bolt definitely better on the serve. Starting to feel better on the forehand. All right.
You definitely play better with the second one.
I did, yeah. I am considering the Bolt B100 V2 for further testing. I'm super excited to test Technifibre rackets. It's one of my favorite companies that was just bought by Lacoste, another one of my favorite companies. And I tested two rackets, the TF-X1 285, and I played just a few points with it and it was simply too light. Again, I need my racket to be around 300 grams for me to play with it. There was a problem with stability at the moment of contact. It was very maneuverable. This racket is also on the stiffer side. It might actually be a little too much on the stiffer side. We'll get to that later. Another wild miss. I'm gonna have to take the 285 TF-X1 out of the consideration. However, the 300 gram version of this exact same racket has slightly different specs and it did feel a lot better. There are some things on this racket that I don't like. That attempt at a half volley drop shot was atrocious. And I do feel like the racket has to do with that, because normally I have pretty good feel there, but I just kind of stop dead on the strings, no feel whatsoever. So not the greatest feel racket. My serve honestly hasn't been working with any racket except the heavier bolt to some degree. So I'm gonna give this one another try.
Yeah, I think you should.
All right, so let me tell you what I'm looking for in a racket. I do like the racket to be responsive. What does that mean? Well, I don't like doing that much work. So I want to have the ability to just bunt the ball, and I want the ball to come off the racket fast. So one test that I look for when I try new rackets is how does the racket behave when I have a half volley from the baseline, for example. Does the ball come off the racket quick? If it does, that's a good indicator that I'm going to like the racket. I've always played with longer rackets, and while the extra length helps my serve, I feel like it's a disadvantage on my forehand, because one of the biggest weaknesses that I have on my forehand is the fact that I often don't finish my forehand. It stops somewhere around here. I would like the racket to be a little bit more maneuverable and have the ability to bring it around easier. I think the shape of my forehand would change from that, and I would be able to get a little bit more spin. Of course, I can make spin, but when I let my forehand rip very hard, intuitively I have a tendency to finish a little bit shorter. Now with a longer racket that has more swing weight, or a racket that's a little bit more head heavy, that's going to be more difficult. So if you have a racket that's more head light, regular length, and possibly with a lower swing weight, there's going to be more maneuverability there, and I'm going to be able to finish my forehand more. Now that's going to be a disadvantage on my serve. So finding the right balance where my forehand can improve without making my serve worse, that's why finding a new racket for me is a very agonizing thing. It's not going to be easy to find a racket that matches those two criteria. I'm going to hit a few more balls with the Bolt B100 V2. And I generally like stiffer rackets because stiffer rackets are generally more responsive. However, when you have a stiffer racket, that comes at the cost of feel. And I do like playing with feel, contrary to what you guys might think. My feel has improved tremendously. You can check out my I'm Talentless video to find out how I improve my feel. But I find that when the racket is too stiff, I lose feel. However, with the Bolt, the feel is pretty good, but also the power is pretty good. I do feel a lot of responsiveness. And I'm also able to finish my forehand quite well. But most importantly, the Bolt is also pretty decent on my serve. I wouldn't say it's the same as my old racket, but the ball comes off the racket pretty quick. And I usually just play out of my arm without using my body to test how much of the power is coming out of the racket. And I gotta say, the Bolt is very responsive even on the serve. So what I'm gonna do is put a few of my favorite rackets aside for a final playtest video. So I plan to test many different rackets from many different companies, and in each one of those testing videos I'm gonna set one or two rackets aside for a final testing video where I'm hopefully gonna select my new racket. I'm not being paid by anyone. I'm not signed to any racket company. And just to reiterate what I said in my wide racket reveal video, I want the racket to feel good in my hand. I play tennis every day. It drives me crazy when the racket is missing shots that it's not supposed to. That's a joke, but I want to play with a racket that's suitable for me out of principle. I'm not going to sign with a company just for the sake of signing. So I'm hereby reserving my right to continue to play with my old racket when all is said and done, because I am very mental when it comes to racket. I'm going into this very positive with the intention of finding a new racket. I hope that I can find one, but I might not, and I'll continue to play with my rackets from 2017. Next racket I'm considering for further testing is the TF-X1 300. This is a very stiff racket with a rating of 71. And the racket does have power, but one gripe I have with it is the fact that it doesn't have a lot of feel. So when I hit my normal ground strokes, whether it's my forehand or my two-handed backhand, I do feel good response. The racket is powerful, no doubt about it, but when I do my drop shots, I don't feel the same type of feel that I normally do. So while these drop shots might not seem different than the drop shots I was hitting with the bolt, I can just tell you that the feeling is not the same. Now, I can probably get used to this because on my old racket, that one is not necessarily considered a feel racket either, and I developed good feel with it. So I think it's quite possible that if I play with this racket longer, that I'll get used to it and my feel improve. So I am not in love with this racket, but it's one of those that I like enough where I can probably like it more if I get used to it a little bit more. So that TF-X1 300 definitely is in the running. Now, how about the serve? I'm giving up that extra ½ inch that I had on my old racket, and it is making a difference. That extra ½ inch does make a difference on the serve, guys. But I don't think this racket is bad for serving. I'm feeling good response. However, I will say that I did like my old racket for the serve a little bit better. I don't think I quite have the same control. Again, my hope is that is something that I can get used to the more I play with this racket. I want to thank you guys again for all the recommendations in my wide racket reveal video. I'm going to test as many rackets as I can. I'm actually super excited about testing certain rackets, so stay tuned for my next racket playtest video.